Meeting for Tuesday, May 26, 2020. At this time, I was going to invite Mr. Lupo for invitation.
Almighty Creator, please look down upon this gathering and provide your servants with the wisdom to do what is right and just, and to know that each one of us must strive to overcome our faults, as none of us are perfect. Please, Lord, protect this great country and all those who serve her. We ask these things in thy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Scott Tremblay.
Here in person.
Vice Mayor William Dittmer.
Here electronically.
Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell.
Here electronically.
Councilman Todd McClary.
Here electronically.
Councilman Tom Kinsella.
Here electronically.
City Attorney James Matthew.
Here in person.
City Manager Vincent Lupo.
Here in person.
At this time, I was looking for a motion to approve council minutes from the May 12th council meeting.
Motion to approve council minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 At this time, I wanted to open from comments from the general public. It's my understanding we had one member of the public signed up that's with us electronically, and I wanted to invite Mr. Mueller to speak at this time.
Mr. Mueller, are you on?
Yes, I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay, just before we get going, I just wanted to give you some feedback on the comments that are being made. I can hear clearly all of the councilmen and women that are calling in remote. The people that are in that room, for some reason, there's background noise that makes it very difficult to hear all of you. Just giving you some feedback. All right. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to speak, and I appreciate all the time and effort each of you are participating in helping making this community a great place. I appreciate all that you're doing for the community and your services. I do have some concerns of the recent Board of County Commission meeting where they more or less approved to move forward with the limited dredging in our community. Disappointed that we're not taking an opportunity to look at trying to get more bang for a buck. And this is not a new issue. I've been on this page for a while. There seems to be some opportunity from what I'm reading, potentially with the CARE Act, as well as other grants that I believe Alan Rose has referenced, as well as additional dredgers that would be able to participate and potentially get more people or dredging companies engaged so that we get more than one bid for this. I really think that we ought to be working with our county to see if we can leverage funds and try to make the best for our community and improve the water quality and the flow out of the bayou. I appreciate all you can do to give that one last consideration. I know that we probably don't have a quote now, but probably need to be looking at opportunities in that area. I also have one question. Has the DMA site disposal that we currently have packed with dirt been addressed and got we got reimbursed for that or requested to reimburse for that? Because I thought that was a reimbursement scenario. We were supposed to get reimbursed at some point in time. I'd like to have some kind of an update on that and keep that on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. At this time, I believe that's all the comments from the general public. I wanted to turn it over to comments from our city manager, Mr. Lupo.
Thank you, Mayor. There are several issues that have come most recently. There was some questions by Mr. Councilman Ms. Marsala Kinsella about Graham Boulevard and 19 and the island and the construction going on there at that site. We've investigated that, and it is some underlying work that's being conducted there. FDOT is fully aware of the issue, and the contractor will be charged fully in replacing all of the damage that has occurred at that single site. We've had a request from Ms. Sullivan, who lives on Old Post, and she is concerned about the excess speed on Old Post, particularly from Bay down Old Post to Coons and out to Brasher Park. I've spoken with our police department to be a little bit more vigilant with respect to speeders on at that location. The acting chief Koch is working on having our speed sign repaired, and Ms. Sullivan is interested in the potentiality of adding speed humps along that section of Old Post. I'll be reviewing that request with police, fire, and our building department, and come back to council for additional remarks with respect to that issue. I've emailed pictures of the pedestrian assistance delimitors on Treadway that were installed last week, and they seem to be doing their job. We've had no other complaints. Our police department is going to become more vigilant with respect to individuals who transgress the one-way direction by violating that, and they will be receiving appropriate warnings and/or summonses as are necessary. As Mr. Mueller alluded to, and as we are all aware, most recently the county commission has approved our move forward with the dredging for channels 1 and 26A as outlined and submitted to by council to our county commission and approved by them. To that end, I have been working with our engineers of record, Dewberry Engineers, where we will be working to extend the existing permits and to move forward with the bidding documents so that we can eventually move forward on that series of dredging issues. At that point in time, we'll be coming back to council with other issues, including changes to the signage, the lighting, the streets, the sidewalks in that area, which council seems keen to work with. As an update on a report, we have been working with the Florida Chiefs of Police Association with respect to obtaining applicants for the position of Chief of Police for the city of Port Richey. To date, we have 26 applications already submitted to the Florida Chiefs of Police Association, and we expect more of the same. They will review those applications and eventually submit them on a reduced basis after their vetting and information process, so that we can begin to look at viable candidates for the chief of police position. And that is an ongoing event, and I'm in contact with them almost on a daily basis. And that is basically my report, sir.
Thank you very much. At this time, I wanted to open comments from myself and the council members, and I wanted to start with our council members. And is there anyone in particular that would like to go first? Hearing nobody, I'm just going to call everybody to give everyone an opportunity to speak. Vice Mayor Will Dittmer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just touching base, there seems to be a lot of conversation with the citizens regarding the property next to American Marine and fencing. I touched base with Mr. Lupo regarding this, and there seems to be a question whether some type of emergency order was used to allow a 6-foot fence in residential. Doing a little research, all I could find is that a 4-foot fence was for residential where it stuck out beyond the front of the building. Since there is no buildings on that property, I don't know where that falls. I'm assuming that's why there's a 6-foot fence allowed.
If I might, Councilman Dittmer, I would like to read into the record a email that I have sent to all of the council with regards to that issue, and I would like up front to assure the council that I have issued no such emergency decree for American Marina concerning anything at American Marina, let alone anything involving powers under COVID-19 executive orders. So I've done none of that. But please let me read this this email after a request from Ms. Simpson to Ms. Martinez, and it reads, American Marina has applied for a permit to fence in the adjacent lots owned by American Marina for safety and security reasons. They are extending the existing fence in place for appearance reasons. The new fencing will not include barbed wire along the top. The owner will be applying for rezoning of lots to C2 from R2 in the near future. The owner was informed that fencing the lot is permitted, but no storage of any vehicles or watercraft is permitted on the site until proper zoning approval has been received. The contractor has not requested an inspection as of this date, and the permit was issued on 4/22/2020. I performed a site visit on 5/20/2020 and spoke with the property manager and informed him of all information provided in this message. He has agreed to not using the property until it is rezoned for storage. The proposed storage will be relocatable, racking similar to the storage areas to the north of the site. Please feel free to contact me if there are any additional questions. Signed, Dallas Falls, Building Official, City of Port Richey. And this email was dated Wednesday, May 20th, 2020, 9:19 a.m. So I hope that answers your question, Councilman Dittmer.
I believe it does, and I think the only question that people may have is the height of the fence in front, but I believe, looking at our city ordinances, it does not have a fence restriction on vacant land that I could find anyway, so that may have answered the question as well. So thank you, Mr. Lupo.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Dittmer, was that all you had for opening comments?
It is. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I wanted to turn it over to Mr. Todd McCleary at this time as well. Todd, you on the line? Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm sorry, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I wanted to pass it over to Councilwoman Sorrell.
Vice Mayor Dittmer addressed my issue on the American Marine fencing, so I have nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. And the last person on the council that I wanted to address was Mr. Tom Kinsella, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lupo, I want to thank you for that upgrading that pedestrian assistance markers on Treadway. It was amazing. Some of the comments I received, amazingly, people driving down Treadway did not realize there was an area for pedestrian traffic until those markers were placed. And noticed the work that was done today on the edging. I like to think this is a beginning of something great for that area down there, and thank the city and the department that did all that work. It was very impressive. Thank you.
Yes,
And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Kinsella. At this time, I wanted to open up with some remarks on some different issues that I've dealt with within the city since the last council meeting. The first one was I was contacted by our auditors, and I had a brief conversation with them, and they wanted to know just basic information and whether or not I had seen any irregularities or any issues with the recent audits and or budgets that we've done, and the answer was no, that I really haven't seen anything. But I think that the audit, that our auditor should be complete, my guess is in the next week or so from talking to the auditor. So I just wanted to kind of let everyone know where that was according to my conversation with him. One of the other things that I wanted to address is I've seen a lot of traffic enforcement at the corner of Old Post and Bay Boulevard. And I wanted to thank the police department, as I live on that road as well, and there's a lot of children that play there. So the increased speed enforcement, I think, is really good for our community, and I wanted to thank the police department for their hard work. The next thing that I wanted to touch base on is right now our meetings, we've been meeting where either myself and Mr. Kinsella were the only ones in chambers with a handful of staff. As COVID-19 expands in different phases, by next meeting, what I wanted to know if everyone's comfortable with is having the entire council meet in chambers. However, because of social distancing guidelines, have the public call in like they had been before the meeting. And I wanted to know by consensus if everyone's comfortable with that for our next meeting. And I'm going to start with Vice Mayor Dittmer.
Yes, that's good. I look forward to being back in chambers. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Sorrell.
Absolutely, positively ready to get back in chambers.
Councilman McClary.
I agree.
Okay, and Councilman Kinsella.
I'm very comfortable, yes.
Okay, so as long as we're not violating any guidelines, that's one of the requests that I had, is that we can all get back into chambers. And then what I'm asking for by consensus, which it sounds like we have, is we'll just have the public continue to call in for comments from the general public. However, we'll all be in chambers together, if that's okay with city manager, city attorney. Yeah, of course.
Presume everyone can hear me. It's just, if everything stays the same, that'll be just fine. I suspect there may be more specifics in the next governor's order, but I'll let you know the moment it comes out, but I suspect it'll be fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly will follow the governor's orders, and with respect to this latest issue, we'll maintain distancing as necessary, and until then, we'll keep the building closed to protect the employees.
Thank you, Mr. Lupo. The last thing that I wanted to touch on was I did meet, when I say met, it was electronically for the Board of County Commissioners meeting, and that was the RAC funding that was the matching grants that we had. That went through on a 3-2 vote from the County Commission. It's been a 6-year endeavor to get some kind of progress. I am excited to see that hopefully in the near future we'll be able to clean our spoil site and make progress with further dredging. So I'm looking forward to that. But one of the spinoffs that happened while I was working, when I say working, I had some conversations with some of the county commissioners about the RAC and the dredging project. And one of the things that came to light or came to my attention from my discussions was it looks like the county may have some money, about $5 million set aside for boat ramp improvements, which is, I don't know if it's a pass-through grant or what kind of funding that may be. But we have Nix Park, where we have a boat ramp that desperately needs some work. And certainly, what I wanted to know if we can put on one of the next agenda items coming up is whether or not that our council can have a discussion on whether or not we want to engage the county to see whether or not any of that funding would be potential funding for us to utilize for Nix Park boat ramps for either improvements, expansion, or what have you. And I wanted to know if the rest of the council was interested in putting that on for discussion.
Mr. Mayor, Tom Kinsella here. A question, would a representative from the county be present for this, or it was just among us council?
Well, my instinct on this, and it would be to talk about it at council so that we can give our city manager some kind of guidelines to engage the county in terms of what kind of funding is available and whether or not we can work on some mutual project at the boat ramps.
If I might add, Mayor and Councilman McCleary, I have had recent conversations with the county administrator and his staff concerning this specific issue, and we are hopefully will be moving in a positive direction. And if there are, I believe what we're looking for is some kind of consensus coming from my council to move forward with those discussions on a deeper level with respect to the repairs to the boat ramp at Nix Park and any modifications to the park. In speaking with not only the county administrator, but also with some of the county commissioners, they seem inclined to assist us with this project in as much as they recognize that the vast number of users of that facility are not necessarily residents of our community. So the city manager will be moving forward with those ongoing conversations, and if council would like to provide any input that I can carry back to the county administrator, I believe that's what the issue is, and question being asked by our mayor.
Mr. Mayor, can I address that?
Yes, of course.
I as well have been talking to Commissioner Wells on those funds, and that was actually brought up in the county meeting regarding those funds and us doing a joint project and proceeding with the Nix boat improvement. So yeah, it looks like something we definitely want to look into going forward on.
Thank you. So you'd say by consensus we want to put it as an agenda item within the next couple meetings?
I like the idea, yes.
Okay. Mr. McCleary, do you have any input?
No, I agree with that idea. Let's put it on the agenda to discuss it further.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sorrell?
Yes, I have no problem with putting it on the agenda.
Okay, by consensus, I'm going to ask our city manager and city staff to see if we can prepare at least a discussion about that for our next council meeting.
Thank you, sir. Consent agenda. Consent agenda.
That was all the comments I had. I was just checking my notes because I had a lot today, so I apologize. At this time, I wanted to move on to the consent agenda, and I was looking for a motion to approve the 4 items that were on the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. At this time, I wanted to move on to council business. The first item up for council business is discussion on interim city manager and the city manager selection process for a permanent city manager. I wanted to break this discussion down so it's a little more manageable. I believe that the discussion on the interim city manager should happen first. So I wanted to open the discussion on that particular topic. The first thing I wanted to say about the interim city manager position and what's going on in the city is I've been the mayor now for a little over a year. One of the things that I really wanted to do is move the city in a positive direction, and sometimes change is necessary for that. We've now come to that crossroads where we can separate the city from some of the controversies of the past and move the city in, I believe, what will be a positive direction. And in doing, though, I think that the most important thing that we should look at for an interim city manager is the process in which we hire one. That having been said, because of some of the controversies, I don't know if, I think the best way to do this would be to go through an executive search firm, and there's some by the ICMA, which is International City Management Association, Florida League of Cities approved, and then the subcategory would be the Florida City County Managers Association. And basically, I'll tell you that Jocelyn put this together for me so I could present it to you guys, the idea that I had in terms of doing this in a neutral way and in a way that is not political in nature. The idea is to get a city manager or interim city manager that has no political ties to our community. They have executive search firms that provide interim city manager services, and they're designed to help communities that are in need of temporary management services, which is where we're at. These firms typically send a sample of resumes for agencies to look at. The managers that they provide are typically retired city managers or managers that are in transition. A temporary manager can be on site quickly, and what I mean by quickly, it's a 1 week turnaround, according to Jocelyn's communications with ICMA, in that with the 1 week turnaround there's a negotiated salary. The negotiated salaries are generally fairly equivalent to what we currently pay, what our current rate is. So what my recommendation for this interim city manager position would be to reach out and utilize some of the resources that we have through the Florida League of Cities, ICMA, and the Florida City County Managers, and employ them to do an executive search whereby the next meeting we'll have a handful of qualified city managers that would be willing to come pretty much at any time after that. And then our council then at that point could vote on the handful of people that would be qualified that have city manager experience. So that's my instinct in terms of how to resolve the issue with the city manager, interim city manager position. And what I wanted to do at this point is turn it over to the council on that issue for either discussion and or any motion.
Okay, this is Tom Kinsella. I have a question, Mr. Mayor. You said that by the next meeting you'll be able to have some information, some candidates?
Correct. There's a 1 week turnaround, so that would give us, by Jocelyn's conversation, that would give us another full week to hopefully have that included in our packet and something that we would be able to vote on at the next meeting. That would be my goal.
I myself like that idea.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Sorrell, the floor is yours.
Yes. I think that we have an excellent opportunity to satisfy some of the citizens' need to start over from scratch at this particular time. I think it would be in the interest of of the city and this council to hire an outside service to come in and bring us something so that we can have an interim manager so that we can proceed with a more serious permanent position at this time. So I'd like to make a motion to hire the outside professional headhunters to bring in some of these people so that we could get started on this immediately.
Okay, so to clarify the motion, you're looking for a motion to hire an executive management firm that is ICMA approved, recommended by the Florida League of Cities, and approved by the Florida City County Managers Association.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have,
Above board and transparent.
yes, ma'am, I agree. So there's a motion on the table.
I'd like to comment on that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, the floor is yours, Vice Mayor.
I agree 100% for transparency, and I think that we should do the search for both the interim and the city manager through these services for all transparency for everyone to see what's going on. So I agree 100%, and I would second that motion.
Okay, so at this point, we have a motion, a second, and I wanted to open for discussion before it's put to a vote. So I wanted to open the floor. The only person that hasn't spoken on this issue is Councilman McClary, and I wanted to pass it over to him if he wishes to speak.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Actually, that was one of the options that I was and directions I was hoping we'd go in as well. Should that fail, we do have other options within city, but I agree for transparency and above board, it would probably be in the interest to bring in an outside party. The question I had pertaining to that, and thank you, Jocelyn, and everyone for doing the research on it. I think the next city manager selection process is probably one of the most important in the city, and it's not something that we should rush. Finding the right candidate, whomever that may be. And in the interim city manager position, is there a time limit that this person would be brought on as? And the reason I'm asking that is if we bring in a person from this search firm, conceivably the search could take 4 or 5, I believe at one point we were waiting, searching for up to 9 months for a new city manager. What are the provisions for the time restrictions of that search, or have we not gotten into that level of detail yet?
Yes, our city attorney wanted to comment.
Yeah. The interim manager, having gone through this a couple of times before, is expecting to be here a while to go through that process. Usually, I think 4 or 5 months at least. But that's something
Correct.
when the interim resumes come in or whatever, if they're limited to 3 months, they'll say that. But they're expecting 4 or 5 months. That's pretty normal. Haven't done this before, whatever
Correct,
that's
sir.
worth.
Okay, great. I just didn't want to have an interim and then have to go through another interim for whatever reason, assuming there was a time limit. So I'm all for the suggestion.
With that, at this time, if there's no further discussion, what I wanted to do is put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And with that, I wanted to move on to the next portion of this discussion, because I kind of bifurcated it, which would be the discussion on the city manager selection process. And if I may open with that as well, one of the things that Jocelyn found when she was talking to this executive management company, because I think she called ICMA, is sometimes you get a person that is an experienced city manager that likes where they're at, and the city likes them. So sometimes it just works out that way, to where we, down the road, if we wanted to, could convert the interim into a permanent. That having been said, that's not necessarily always the case. So I think that the next plan of action would be to use the same type of firm, if not the same firm, to start to collect resumes as well as applicants, because I think what needs to happen, which we don't have, in my humble opinion, I don't think our city has the resources to do, would be to collect all these resumes. I think the last city manager search that we had, we must have had 200 applicants and resumes, and weed those out to people that either have prior experience or the proper education, and so we can, as a council, start to interview them. So my recommendation would be to go through a similar management firm for the city manager selection process for the full-time position as well.
Can I comment, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, of course.
I thought actually in the motion it was for
Did.
both positions, but maybe I heard that incorrectly.
No, you didn't. It was for both positions.
Thank you.
So So the how we're going to do the city manager selection process is still on the table, but I think it should be the same as what we've already voted on for the interim, I guess is what I was driving at, and I just wanted to open it for discussion.
Well, I believe that we should follow the same process for transparency for the temporary as for the city manager.
Does anyone else have any other comment or suggestions?
Just another question based off of that. In the search process for the overall city manager, does the executive search, or does the firm work with the, I guess it would be in our case, council, on the initial job description? Obviously, they have a lot more history and ability to develop a job description, but is there a finality to the job description before they issue out to the search firm? Or from a process standpoint, how are we looking?
Mr. McCleary, can I pass you over to the city attorney who's done this before?
Hello. When you engage the search firm for the permanent city manager, they will do they'll do everything from the beginning to the end, or any portion of it that you want. To do the whole Megillah, for the lack of a better word, they will aid you. They're probably going to want something from you, some input, but they'll prepare the description. They'll do the advertising. They'll sort through the responses, and they'll do literally everything if you want them to, or they'll just do advertising and send it all to you, which is the first major decision. So it depends on how much you want them to do. So, they'll come back with a list. Do you want us to do A, B, C?
If I might add to what our attorney has just stated, there's generally a 5-step rule that they follow, or system that they follow. The first one is to define the job qualifications and requirements for the position. And this is called a recruitment profile. They identify and recruit qualified, vetted candidates. They evaluate the prospective candidates on an individual basis. They make recommendations and help in selection, employment negotiations, and facilitate that employment. And then they establish an evaluation criteria and follow up if requested. That's the general steps that they would follow.
That's the whole Megillah, right?
Right, that's the whole Megillah.
And if I may, Mr. McCleary, just speak, I think one of the problems we're going to run into is losing our assistant city manager would have been one of the people that would have been able to sift through all the applicants and kind of narrow them down. Because we don't have that position filled, I would think that we would want a service, a search firm service to provide that, to where they narrow down some of the applicants to where we can start to interview.
Oh yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm 100% on board with the search firm doing the search and help vetting down the candidates and providing guidance. But my only real question was, to make sure that we assist in setting the job description to the needs of Port Richey. So we get the kind of funnel the types of candidates we want to advertise to, of course, with the search firm's guidance and best practices. So I am 100% on board with them doing the majority of the heavy lifting and the majority of the vetting and providing their guidance as much as possible. It's more of tweaking just to the individual needs of Port Richey. That's where my concern was or comment was too.
Any move forward with any firm, the eventual contract will come to council's approval at any rate.
Yes.
I promise you, I'm not trying to drive this conversation, but just so you know, legally, the only requirement is that you reduce your arrangement with your permanent city manager to a contract. That's in our charter. With regard to the two major issues that I'm sure the search firm will tell you is, number one, salary. They're going to ask what kind of salary you want to offer. That'll become very important. And number two, the most major thing, even more than salary, is they're going to ask you whether the interim manager is eligible to apply for the job. I can tell you from past experience, if you say yes, the interim is eligible to apply for the job, it will change the dynamics of who applies a lot. Because usually when you do that, many councils generally will choose the interim manager because they're there. They know them over the course of a couple of months, et cetera, as to taking the risk of going to the outside. So the search company will go to you and say, right out of the box, will that person be eligible? So this is your choice. And what salary? So those are two things you really want to discuss.
And if I could just jump in as well, that would be my concern as well, that we are, if the interim person is part of the permanent pool, one, does it limit the pool, and two, does it bias our thinking to the best candidate that's available? Like Mr. Matthews said, you're picking the one you know, as opposed to one who may come along and be, a better fit in some fashion just because we're picking the one you know. And it's more of something that we have to be careful of and really think about.
No, I agree, and in my humble opinion, I think that the quality of applicants will be diminished if we have an interim that we're considering hiring. So we may want to eliminate that possibility right up front. But that's obviously open for discussion and open for debate amongst the council.
Motion?
Now, if I may just jump in on one more item, and this is more of a question than anything. In the interim city manager, are they typically, retired city managers or something of that
Yes.
nature? So they may not necessarily, I'm just thinking about the pool of candidates that we're drawing from for the two different positions. Assuming we, as a council, lock off the interim city manager from becoming a permanent candidate, that's going to shift the pool somewhat, because obviously then we're just looking for someone who's only looking to do the job for 6
Correct.
months or a year or whatever the case may be. So that generally tends to lead to a more to a person who's been, doing the job before, has retired, and is just looking for a nice gig down in Florida or something of that nature for 6 months, as opposed to a permanent solution. Am I correct in that assumption? And I'm kind of asking Jim Matthews, as he's been through this before.
Okay.
I've been to, maybe 8 different annual Florida League of Cities, as well as the municipal attorneys, and yes, that's absolutely correct. Yes.
In addition, one of the organizations has something called the Senior Advisors Program, which is exactly the same thing, made up of retired city managers. So you're correct in your analysis. Motion?
So the question is, did anyone want to make a motion or continue discussion?
Well, I'll make the motion to hire the
Executive
search entity to fulfill the requirements of the permanent city manager position as well.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion, a second. Is there any need for further discussion? Hearing none, let's put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. At this time, I wanted to move on to the next item up for council business, which is our status of the police chief search, and I'm going to pass that to Mr. Lupo.
Yes, Mayor and Council, as I stated earlier, we are currently working with the Florida Chief of Police Association, and they have been advertising in all the professional journals. They have been advertising in many different sections and formats. And as of 4:30 this evening, we've had 26 individuals who submitted their application for review by the Chiefs Association, which includes 2 individuals who specifically will be vetting each individual applicant. The process is moving forward on a timetable that would hopefully culminate in mid-July, all things being equal. at that point in time, those candidates will probably be brought back for final selection. The process is clear, concise. We've distributed the documentation. The links are on our sites as well in all of the professional journals. Obviously, it is being well received with 26 applications in the last 4 or 5 days that it's been out. So we're moving quickly to obtain a permanent chief of police for the city of Port Richey. In the interim, I must say that our police force has been working exceptionally well. We have had more than our normal share with respect to events. We had a extremely successful drug apprehension interdiction last week. The force is moving quickly. We have moved forward with respect to the acquisition of the vehicles. We're honing in on the final phases. We've already ordered the vehicles, and so that's moving down the line. But with respect to the search itself, it is going full bore as quickly and efficiently as this organization, which is known for its efficiency, will provide the city.
Thank you, Mr. Lupo. At this time, I wanted to open up for discussion on, or any questions as it relates to the hiring process and where we're at in reference to our new police chief search.
I'll jump in with two quick questions, and actually one just a clarification, because I apologize because of the electronic media. To summarize it, where we are, we're full bore with the selection process, and you are expecting, or the expectation is by mid-July, we will have candidates from the Police Chiefs Association presented to us. Is that correct?
That is my hope, sir. If not sooner, it may be later. I can't give you
it's an estimate, and it could go either way somewhat.
Yeah, that is my estimate. It could be mid-July, could be end of July, but it'll be sometime in that time frame, I would hope.
Okay. And one more quick question, and I did receive, and this is actually more for a discussion point for all of council. I did receive, I think we all have received, a letter from the PBA asking to be incorporated as a stakeholder in the selection process, or at least to comment on the applicants presented by the Police Chiefs Association. And I think on behalf of our officers, we at least owe a discussion to that effect, if we want to include them as a stakeholder, not necessarily a decision maker, but a stakeholder who could provide comments. And I was kind of throwing that out there for discussion amongst council.
And if I may, Mr. McCleary, the first thing I wanted to kind of clear up is I thought that I heard either you or Mr. Lupo say that the final candidates would be presented to council, and I don't know if that's within our purview. I think that normally.
Let me correct myself. I know the city manager makes the ultimate decision-making process, but I believe the discussion was council would have input to that effect, is where we had left it.
No, I remember that from the last meeting. So the answer was?
The answer very simply is that with respect, the Florida Chiefs of Police Association will obtain applications from interested candidates. They will be vetted, they will be drawn down to a manageable number, because I expect the final number to be in excess of 75 or 80 or even 90 applications. That number will be reduced. A number of candidates will be brought to the then sitting city manager, who will then reduce that to a further number. And when the process of application, acceptances, and reviews are completed, he or she will make a decision, and it'll be that individual's city manager's choice to, and I would assume that he would bring that information to council, explaining his or her selection by charter law, by charter requirements of that individual. I'm sure that the city manager will not relinquish those rights, but I'm sure that the new city manager will want to work closely with council. With respect to the PBA and their interest, obvious interest in involving themselves in the selection process of a police chief, I thank them for their letter and for their concern, but if I were the then city manager, I certainly would again thank them for their concern, and would certainly show them the transparency of the selection, as would council would like to see the transparency of the selection. But I personally don't believe we would need their assistance.
And
that is my personal opinion, sir.
And Mr. McClary, if I may comment on that issue, I think one of the perks in my mind of getting a professional retired city manager is we are going to get a new set of eyes, and it's going to be double vetted, because you're going to also have from the Florida Police Chief Association professionals that come in and narrow down the search. So I think by virtue, if we follow this protocol and procedure and how we procure a city manager, an interim city manager, I think it will be transparent. One of the perks of having an outside city manager come in and make this selection is I don't see where they'll have any political pull one way or the other in terms of who the next police chief is. So I'm hoping that eases some of the concerns of council in terms of who the next police chief is. And the reason that I'm a little concerned is I think that as we search for a new city manager, if we restrict or undermine the city manager authority, I think it will diminish the value of that position, and I think that we will struggle to find a city manager that has value to our city. So that's my concern, and I just wanted to put that out there for discussion.
Yeah, and if I can just tag in
Of
one
course.
other element, though, feasibly with the time frame of a late July selection process, mid to late July selection process, we're actually would be in the interim city manager, or likely be in an interim city manager who may actually rely on council or feedback from council or whomever, since they are essentially an interim city manager.
Sure.
So we have to think about the line overall, because the direction from the interim city manager, and I have every faith that he will do the best of his duties, but if I was an interim city manager at that point, I would actually look for some direction as to where they want to go, knowing I'm a short timer, for lack of a better term.
Logical conclusion.
That's something we just have to kind of be careful of.
No, I agree. If the city manager, whoever's sitting there, reaches out to us for some input or opinion, I think that we're well within our boundaries to give it. But I don't know if we're within our boundaries to say that we want to intervene and take some part in the selection process. I don't know if that's appropriate cutting the other way, I guess, is where I'm going with this.
Can I make a comment on that as well?
Of course.
My thinking on this, on the PBA, being that the chief of police is not a PBA member, trying to be as transparent as possible, I wouldn't want it to look like that the PBA as a union may have any sway over who comes in the office down the line when negotiations with the chief and officers are transpiring. So my recommendation would not allow the PBA to be involved and go strictly through the service we're using.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dittmer. Did anyone else have any other further comments or conversation?
Good.
And this doesn't look like an item that requires any kind of a motion, so I think that closes the discussion. However, I think it's something worth monitoring as we get a new city manager and maybe bring it back at some point for discussion, if that's okay by consensus.
Sure.
Is everybody okay with bringing it back once we get a new city manager to kind of see where the process is at?
I'm okay with that.
Mr. Kinsella, do you have
Yes.
any opinions? Mr. McClary, are you okay bringing it back once we get a new city manager?
Yes.
Okay. So I think by consensus, we'll bring it back and just kind of monitoring the hiring process, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you. With that, it'll close the discussion and on the status for police chief search. The last item for council business is going to be consideration of fire department equipment purchase, and I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Lupo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consideration of fire department equipment purchase at issue. For city council consideration is the purchase of waterproof battery-operated tools to include a cutter, spreader, ram, strong arm entry tools for municipal emergency services in the amount of $40,120 for the fire department. These tools will increase the capabilities of the fire department in removing victims trapped in vehicles and serve as replacements for outdated tools. Pricing for these tools is based on a Lake County's contract. This contract is included in the agenda packet for review. The tools are manufactured by Hearst, which includes a 10-year warranty. Yearly service of $600 will be required to maintain this equipment. Currently, the fire department budgets $1,000 per year for NFPA required servicing. The equipment purchase is budgeted in the Penny for Pasco Fund 117-22-613. Action. Motion to approve the purchase of waterproof battery-operated rescue tools for the fire department from Municipal Emergency Services in the amount of $40,120, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lupo. At this time, I had a question. I see Mr. Quinn with us, President in Chambers, so everyone knows he's here. One of the things that I wanted to ask is I see that was probably off of a piggyback contract of competitive pricing. That having been said, do you know whether or not there's any grant money where we could seek to get more equipment for the same amount of money? Do you know whether or not there's anything out there?
Are you asking if there's grant equipment, the money for extrication tools specifically?
Correct.
There is the Firehouse Subs grant, but unfortunately we're not able to apply for that for another year
Because of the boat?
Because of the boat.
Okay.
So other agencies like Pasco County did use Firehouse Subs to purchase these tools, but we're unfortunately not able to go on that grant for at least another year. And there's no guarantee because we've already been a recipient of way more than what they've ever approved before.
No.
By the way, the individual speaking is Captain Tom Quinn of our fire department.
Thank you, Captain Quinn. I wanted to open up for any discussions or motions or questions of council.
May I speak, Mayor?
And can you identify yourself and you can have the floor?
This is Vice Mayor Dittmer.
Okay, thank you. The floor is all yours.
I've gone over this, and being our first responders, and seeing that we've done this on a piggyback with funds provided in the budget, I would like to go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to open the floor if there's any further discussions and or questions. Hearing none, at this time I would just want to put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. That concludes council business for this evening. At this time I wanted to move over to old business. And I was going to open old business, and I see that we have our acting chief right now, and I wanted to ask him the status of the CAD system, which I know that so many people put a lot of hard work and money into, and I didn't know if there were any updates on that.
The last update on that, the computers that were slated to come to us from the sheriff's office to be donated to the city to be utilized when everybody went to working remotely from home, they had to tap those computers and put them back out temporarily. So they're working on getting them back in. The retrofit of the system that the county has been working on to incorporate us and the fire department into it, that portion has been complete. So it should be any time now. We're just waiting for those computers to come back in and then be able to flip the switch.
The only other question that I had is I know that there was some training as it goes to dispatchers on that equipment as well as some of our staff. What's the process? How's that going with the training?
The training for the dispatchers was done remotely. We've got it live in a training mode in dispatch that they can practice on in the meantime throughout their shifts when they have a little bit of downtime. Several months back, as far as the officer side of it, we actually sent everybody to in-person training to utilize the CAD system.
So we're pretty much ready to go in online as soon as those computers are released back to us?
Yes, sir. It should hopefully be any time.
Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just was kind of curious as to where we were at with that. That's all the old business I had, and I wanted to pass it over to the council members at this time for any old business. And if you may, just for efficiency, I'll just call on people. I'll start with Mr. McCleary.
Well, thank you. My question was the CAD system, so we covered that. The only other question, I know Mr. Lupo had mentioned that we had ordered the police vehicles, the 6 police vehicles. Do we have an estimated delivery date on any of those, or is that something? Do we even? I know the factories have been closed for COVID-19 and they're just starting production, but have they even given a window as to when?
The last time I spoke with the Chief Koch, the waiting time was 22 to 26 weeks. Is that still correct, sir?
Yes, sir. I had gotten another estimate about 20 weeks, give or take. So anytime from mid-September to mid-October, that's what we're looking at.
Yes.
And that's just for the delivery of the vehicles themselves.
Right. So we're still looking at 22 to 26 weeks, sir.
And so 22 to 26 weeks for the vehicles and then another 4 weeks or so for the equipment? Is that, or is that 26 weeks inclusive of the equipment?
No, sir. At 22 to 26 weeks upon delivery of the equipment, and then we have the installation and the striping and all the other accoutrements.
So that's usually a 4-week process, something in there?
Depending upon availability of the individual equipment, yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
I wanted to move on to Councilwoman Sorrell.
The CAD system and the police cars were my biggest priority, and it seems like they've been answered thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I wanted to go on to Councilman Kinsella.
Yeah, just clarification again, going back with the cruisers. The cruisers actually have been ordered, correct?
Yes, sir, and paid for.
Thank you. That's what I was inquiring.
Thank you, Councilman Kinsella. Is that all you had?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, I wanted to recognize our Vice Mayor, Mr. Dittmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A little bit of old business, that'll be future business regarding the fire truck and infrastructure. I know we are in the midst of working on our new budget. Possibly we could look into having some discussion on those items on a future agenda so we can start formulating a process for those big ticket items.
That definitely will be on the next agenda, sir. It would have been on this one, but we thought it was not quite ready yet, but will be on the next agenda. We'll have a full briefing from both our fire department and our fiscal department.
Thank you, Mr. Lupo. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. That's That's all we have for old business. At this time, I was looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, guys.